Hello everyone, my name is Nishi Ajmera. I work as a solution architect. I am passionate about AI and machine learning. I'm also a Google developer expert in AI and machine learning. Uh, Also a woman tech maker ambassador. I'm passionate about promoting diversity in the world of tech. And today I'm here to talk about a very important concept named function calling while building applications using large language models. So, in this video, I'll start with a very short brief of what large language models are. I understand a lot of people out there are using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and there are a lot of generative AI applications which people are using to speed up their day to day tasks. Uh, so we'll just touch upon what LLMs are, what are their capabilities, what are their limitations, and then how function calling expands the capabilities of large language model and help build applications which can use these large language models and then connect these models to the external services or to real world data. And then towards the end, I'm going to walk you through a notebook where we are going to build an exchange rate application using Gemini 1.5 Pro. Okay, so let's dive right into it. First things first, what are large language models? Large language models are machine learning models that can comprehend and generate human like text. Uh, I understand there are a lot of tools out there. So I use generative AI app in my day-to-day task. I'm an engineer and I use ChatGPT, I use Claude for my coding activities and it works great. But there are certain limitations to these models. So if you are building an application with just LLMs, there are a lot of limitations, and one of the limitations is that the large language models cannot talk to the external environment or cannot talk to the real world, cannot connect to the real world data. So I'll give you an example. When GPT 3.5 came in, and if you'd ask ChatGPT, what's the weather outside today? The model will either hallucinate, or it would, after ChatGPT applied some proper guards, it would respond with something like, I don't have access to real time information. And then it will give you some steps as to how you can figure out the weather for yourself. Okay. So this is where your function calling comes into picture. There are a lot of agentic applications which are being built on top of this concept, but not the agentic applications is not just function calling, it is a lot more than that. But this is one of the basic concepts which you need to know when you're building applications using large language models. So now let's get right into it. Let's see how function calling helps LLM to connect to the external services and see how it works. Function calling is also referred to as tool use because it allows the model to use an external tool such as an API or a function. So when we are submitting a prompt to the language model, along with the prompt, we can also pass a set of tools which the model can use to respond to user's query. So going back to the example of when we ask the model what is the weather today, now in that example we are going to pass the prompt. So what's the weather in London? That's the prompt which I'm passing to the language model. Along with that prompt, I'll also pass this function definition. So if you look at this function definition, it says the name of the function is get weather info, and the description talks about what the function does. So if you look over here, it says fetch the weather info for a given location, right? Then if you look at the parameters, it says it takes one parameter and that's a required parameter. So location is a required parameter and it is of type string. And what value will location have? So that uh, you can that the model will figure it out by the description. So the description says location to fetch the weather info. Now the model will look at this function definition and look at the prompt and will try to figure out whether it can use this function to respond to a user's query. Now, in our scenario, yes, the model can use this function to respond to the query. So the model responds with uh, such kind of an output. Now, this may differ from model to model. OpenAI would have a different structure. This is the structure which I've picked from Gemini, but the content of it would remain the same. The JSON structure might change here and there, but it will have all these attributes. So it will, first thing first, it defines that it is a function call, and then it defines the name of the function which needs to be called, and then there is an arguments attribute which defines what arguments and what are the values which needs to be passed in to call that function. So here in the arguments, you can see the key is location, and it is passing the value as London, right? Now, the thing which we need to take care of, the point to note here, the point to note over here is uh, the model doesn't call the function. The model just decides which function to call and with what attributes to call that function. When you're building an application, you need to build an application which uses that function name and the attributes, and then calls that function, executes that function, fetches the response, and then sends the response back to the model. So if you look a typical flow, the application flow of a large language model using function calling, it is like this. So user sends a prompt, right? The application sends the prompt and the function declaration to the model. Model identifies the function and the parameters to be used, and there is this function calling. This is the module which basically makes that, executes that function. It can be a Python function, it can be an API call, it can be a call to a database, it can be anything over here, right? So in this case, we are making an API call. So it sends the request, it receives the response, and then it sends the response from the API back to the model. The model processes that response and returns the response in the natural language, which can then be sent back to the user. So this is how the function calling works. Now, going back to the notebook where we are going to build our exchange rate application. So let's get started. We are going to install the required packages first. So we are going to install Google Cloud AI Platform package. Then we are going to authorize this Colab notebook to access the Google Cloud environment. Uh, so in this case, I have given access to my access this I have given access to this notebook to access my Google Cloud environment. So when I run this cell, it will ask me to log in with my Google credentials, and that's the way this notebook gets connected to my Google Cloud environment. And then I have to specify the project ID and the location. So in order to use the generative AI models from Gemini or from Vertex AI, you need to provide the project ID and the location. Then we are going to import the Vertex AI module. We are going to initialize the Vertex AI module with the project ID and the location. And then we are going to import the generative model, uh, and we are going to import Gemini 1.5 Pro over here. Now we are just going to give it a try. So we are going to just send a simple prompt saying what's the exchange rate for euro to dollar today. And if you see, if I ask this question to Gemini 1.5 Pro, it gives me this answer that I don't have real time information, including live exchange rates. And then it gives you tips of how you can find that information, right? Now, one of the other way would be to use some sort of prompt engineering onto the response, and then try to make the API calls yourself to fetch the response. So if you like you see over here in this example, give this prompt, what's the exchange rate from euros to US dollars today? And then along with this prompt, I provide a small system prompt which says your task is to extract the parameters from users input and return it as a structured JSON payload. The user will ask about exchange rate and which currency they are converting from, and converting to. And then we say please extract the currencies as parameters and put them into the JSON object. Now when we do this, this is the response which we get from the model. This is okay. This is also one of the ways to achieve, like you can use these parameters and make the API calls. But the thing is, this is not consistent. The model does not consistently give you the same JSON structure every time. That's why this is not reliable. Hence, we are now going to move on to function calling. So, we are going to import the required modules over here, the required imports, function declaration, generative model, content, part, tool. And this is our function declaration. So we want to get the exchange rate. So name of our function is get exchange rate. The description is get the exchange rate for currencies between countries. Then the parameters are, we have defined three parameters: currency date, currency from, currency to. The type of all three parameters is string. We have made two parameters required: currency from and currency to are required parameter, currency date is an optional one. Now if you see the description of currency date, it says that the date must always be in this format, or the value latest if a time period is not specified. So if the time period is not specified, it is suggesting the model to use this value latest. And then currency from and currency to, if you see in the description, it has mentioned that it needs the currency to convert from in ISO 4217 format. So it has defined the format over here, that this is the format in which uh, I want the currency from attribute to be in. Same is for currency to. Now we'll wrap this up into a tool. So we create an exchange rate tool, and then we pass this tool along with our prompt to the model. So if you see over here, model, and then in this tools parameter, we are passing this exchange rate tool. You can pass a list of tools. You can pass, I think there is a limit of around 100 if I'm not wrong, but you can pass more than one tools over here, and then the model decides which tool to use based on the description of the tool, right? So now if we look at the response from this, the response says role model, and then it says function call, and it defines that okay, you can use this function. The currency date is latest, currency from is AUD, and currency to is SEK. So our prompt was what is the exchange rate from Australian dollars to Swedish krona, and then we are asking how much is 500 Australian dollar worth in Swedish krona, right? We have not specified the time span. That's why it has taken the value as latest, and then it has converted Australian dollars into the ISO 4217 format, which is AUD, and then Swedish krona is SEK. Now we use this response, and then we fetch these values. So we fetch the to, date, and the from, and we use this and make our own API call. So we make the API call over here, where we pass the parameter date in the API call, and we pass the params as the to and the from, like this whole body goes as the params over here, and this is the response which we get. Now we pass this response to the model. So if you look at the next step over here, is the first thing which we are passing is our prompt. The second thing which we are passing to the model is the function and the function definitions which were available. And the third thing you see over here is the function response. So we send from function response, and then we send the name of the function and the response available. And then we also pass the tools, the list of tools. And then the model processes all the information, and this is the response which you get. So it says to calculate how much 500 Australian dollars is worth. First, we need to get the current exchange rate. Okay, and then it gets the current exchange rate, and then it does the calculation over here, and finally it gives you the answer that 500 Australian dollars is worth 3509.15 Swedish krona as of 25th October. So if you see the prompt over here, in the prompt we also mentioned that give your answer in step with lot of details and context, including the exchange rate and date. That's why the model gave you a detailed step by step answer of what it is doing. So that's all about function calling with Gemini. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.